I'm back onto a high horse that I've been talking about the last couple of days about the difficulties with not migration, but the problems of poor infrastructure support and what that means to urban planning, to settlement, regionally in particular, and how there's difficulty supporting the existing population and how that's going to be amplified as we're trying to increase the population through various means. So again, SBS piped up with an article this morning about the need to increase the supply of skilled workers into regional Australia, well, everywhere really. And that goes back as well to the migration. Not every migrant coming in, it comes in on a skilled visa or has been targeted for their skill set. And I mean, even if every migrant coming in was on the skilled visa, there'd probably still be a shortfall with that. It then comes down to distribution and having access to services and blah, 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 blah. Now, again, because of its focus as being a multicultural media service, the people it's talking, most of the people it's talking to who are these skilled workers arriving into regional regions are people from either recent migrants or from migrant background, which also means difficulties for them, not just coming into the country, but also getting work and everything else. The fact they're talking about regional Australia in the Hunter region, I mean, that's still pretty close to the major cities. That's like bedroom community type thing. I mean, Muswellbrook, yeah, okay, except that it's called regional, it's almost coastal. It's a bit different when you're only an hour, half an hour from Newcastle and a couple of hours from Sydney. It's changed over time. I mean, Goulburn, as an example, used to be seen as a completely rural town, as a regional centre. As the highway between Sydney and Melbourne kept being upgraded and transport links were improved and people realised that commuting from Western Sydney or the outer city suburbs into Sydney jobs was taking them 3 odd hours a day, the attractiveness of places like Goulburn as a place to live but still commute to Sydney suddenly became a lot more attractive, and places like Colotop and Bargo and other places in the Southern Highlands where the road links were pretty good, you suddenly had explosions in population because they effectively became satellite suburbs of Sydney. Yes, technically they're still in regional Australia. Yes, they sometimes lack the higher end infrastructure and services, but their position as a pure regional town or city doesn't exist as much anymore. It's like saying Wollongong was a standalone place. When I was growing up, I knew kids who commuted daily on the train from Wollongong to there was Sydney Boys High School, which is right in the centre of the city, just off Hyde Park. And for them, it was a shorter commute from Wollongong to the CBD in Sydney every day and back than it was for some of their classmates who came in from Campbelltown or Bankstown. And it's like, but you're living in what's nominally a separate city. When things are that closely connected, I don't know that you can necessarily call it independently regional as much anymore. That being said, the concerns raised do still apply to places that are well and truly regional, like Orange or Dubbo or, well, I won't say Newcastle because I think Newcastle's too close. The other bigger centres like Armidale, Wagga Wagga, Albury, mainly New South Wales places because it's what I know. But yeah, so she's surprised. It seems that she's surprised about how well she's been accepted into the community and integrated, which says to me a little bit that she believed the whole Australians are racist, you're not going to be accepted, people hate you, blah, 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 blah. And what I was saying the other day was that even in these small towns, as long as you're part of the social fabric, people accept you. They don't mind. Everyone's got their own secrets. You're just another person. The fact that she's also providing an essential service probably doesn't hurt, which is good. But the difficulty, and this comes down to, I mean, GPs is a big one. You hear cases of all sorts of insane pay packages being offered for a GP in really regional Australia because it's hard to retain them. They'll come for a couple of years, but the money and quality of life and stuff is so much easier in the bigger cities. So they'll hang around regional areas for a little bit and then drift back to the bigger cities, where it's also easier for them to refer to specialist services and things like that. So the first problem is encouraging them to arrive. The second problem is once they've arrived, how do you hang on to them? And I mean, if there's no midwifery support in the region, well, you can't have kids. Well, you can. It's just an acceptance that the quality of infrastructure and access to services is going to be less. Now, should it be higher? Yeah, I think so. Is it going to be? Yeah, unlikely. I mean, it's not a perfect world. You're not going to have a inner city trauma department in every regional hospital or anything like that. It just doesn't work that way. And so there's going to be a degree of loss of service. But that also then ties into the difficulty of living in regional Australia, that if you have to attend specialist treatment like cancer support and things like that, chances are you have to travel and travel a long way to get that. So, I mean, when I was born, I wasn't born in the town we lived in. Mum had to go to the nearest hospital, which was at least one town over. But, yeah, that's just what happened. And it talks about, okay, yeah, there's jail systems up there, but the lack of mental health services. Again, we talked yesterday, we're talking about veteran healthcare in the ACT, because of the article that the ABC had. It specifically mentioned the lack of psychiatric support in the ACT, or available psychiatric support in the ACT, and that people were having to go to Sydney and Melbourne to get assistance. Now, Muswellbrook is a lot smaller than Canberra, and Canberra is, obviously, like I said, capital city, seen as city, but in practical terms, it's a large regional centre. It has access to, more specialists than most regional centres, but there are still things where the supply of specialists is just not enough and people have to travel to Sydney or Melbourne, which Canberra also then sucks up the need from people who live regionally next to it as well. So, yeah, sometimes people have to bounce across 2 or 3 services before having to go to one of the other capital cities to get health services. So, mental health services, again, the fact that Muswellbrook's having an issue with it, not a surprise, to be honest, not a surprise. You'd be hard-pressed to find a regional area that has well-funded, well-supported, well-developed mental health infrastructure. And drug and alcohol services tend to be associated with that. Those sort of substance abuse problems tie into mental health quite often. And, well, drug and alcohol services everywhere are kind of lacking. So, I mean, the mayor there says exactly what I've just been talking about, the fact that it's a near impossibility to get these sort of services in location. And the point that isn't covered there as well is these regional centres provide services to their surrounding area. So there's smaller towns and settlements that would never have these services, and they have to travel to the regional centres to get that sort of support. So, like in the Northern Rivers area of New South Wales, what's the name of the city? Lismore is where the big regional hospital is, and has very well developed services and support, but they can't cover every eventuality. If you have more complex needs, you end up going to Brisbane, to one of the major hospitals up there, or maybe even the Gold Coast. But Lismore Hospital is an aggregator for the area, and so you have smaller hospitals, Grafton, Maclean, places like that. They'll feed their more complex patients up to Lismore, because they're smaller towns / cities, and they don't have, again, the depth of support and infrastructure. And then you go further down the pipeline to more farming settlements or even beach towns where they don't have hospitals. And so you've got this sort of pipeline feeding people from where they live, maybe up 3 or 4 stops to finally get to the level of care they require. And so you could go from a beach town into a more regional centre to get to the hospital, that's then fed into Lismore because it's got access to the better services, and then you're fed from Lismore either to Sydney or to Brisbane because it can't provide the services. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. You're not going to have full level of support everywhere. So, I mean, it is good to see that the governments are trying to address things like that, trying to attract higher skilled workers into regions and give them connectors and infrastructure support. So we were talking about the other day, those greenfield suburbs that are lacking infrastructure connections and everything else. And it talks about the difficulty of people arriving into situations where they're lacking these supports. They need to have this additional support network as they're arriving and settling in. And so, yeah, again, it talks to the immigrant community about what's going on and how these additional support services are providing a good settlement into Australia for them. And again, we go back to that problem of the suburbs that are being built without access to infrastructure like this, or without a government system that's bringing things forward. Now, it talks about, obviously, issues associated with the major employment in the region. It's a coal mining region, and they're moving away from coal mining, and so they're going to have major shifts in employment in the region in coming years, maybe even depopulation, because people will move out of the area looking for work elsewhere. So it'll be interesting, and it'll also be interesting to see, hopefully, that the integration into the community remains for these people from foreign nations.